The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to our MWF webinar this week. My name is Anesu and I'm a technical specialist here at Struxoft working within the Liverpool office. I will be organizing today's presentation. For those of you who are new with us today, our principal software, MWF, which stands for Metal Wood Framer, is our automated Revit wall, floor, ceiling and truss framing software for light gauge steel and wood modeling. Today, we have our technical specialist, Natalie, who will be continuing part 2 of our key features within panel properties series. Last week, we went through features such as stud spacing, openings, bearings, and horizontals. This week, Natalie will continue deeper into the property options in the topics outlined on the screen. So just a rundown on the procedure of this webinar. We will be taking a few live questions at the end of the session. To be selected, please press the raise hand button on the control panel and please make sure your audio is working. If you prefer, you can also ask questions throughout the webinar using the questions tab of the GoTo dashboard. So that's it from me. I'll now hand it over to Natalie and she can begin the webinar.
Thank you, Anesu, and welcome to this week's webinar. As you can see, I have listed mine and Anesu's emails here, so feel free to contact us if you'd like any further information after this session. Today we're going to pick up from where we left off in last week's webinar with part 2 of our panel properties series. As you can see, we have our Revit model from last week with an additional floor, but we'll be working on that first floor today to show you more of our options available in the miscellaneous tab. On the first floor, we'll just zoom into that one here. You can see that I've already applied some MWF joins, split markers, and then framed the panel using a combination of LGS and wood. I'm going to start on one of my interior walls to apply some bracing, and then I'm going to work around the exterior of my model to cover each feature from splices right down to Holddowns. Just to let you know, if you see any panels that look slightly longer than the length of the wall, this is just down to the MWF joins. They can sort of slightly change the add extension to the framings just to accommodate the join. So the other thing I should note before we start is there are many different ways of working in MWF. So some of the functionality we look at today can also be applied to your panels using different methods. However, it's a great way to know exactly what's available to you in our properties tab. So today we're going to look at how to apply different types of bracing to your panels. And then we're also going to look at how to splice the top tracks in your panel, applying lifting holes, which is very, very useful when you're transporting panels from your factory to site. We're going to look at how to add kickers and deflection connectors, changing the positions of your panel labels using the annotations in properties. We're going to look at controlling panel cutbacks and stud extensions. And then we're going to look at hole types and how to adjust their placement in the whole series. And finally, we're going to look at how to add some anchors and hold downs. So let's get started looking at our bracing. So we've got one of our interior panels here. Everything's already framed, so I'm just going to click into our MWF properties. And of course, the first thing I need to do is go down and switch to our wall module. So here we are, we've got our properties tab. Just give that a couple of seconds to wake up. Here we are, so down to miscellaneous, and we're just going to start on bracing. Just one moment. Okay, here we are. So what you see here is when your bracing comes up, is you have the option to apply diagonal braces and X braces. This type of bracing is really good for adding entire panel stability. So what you get is the option to add your bracing on the interior or the exterior, or both. Now for my bracing, I'm going to select just a default flat strap to go over our panel. And then what we have here is something quite similar to what is in our horizontal properties. You can reference the start of your bracing and then the end of your bracing. So we're just going to have it going from the two end studs, basically. You can also select a little bit of an angle rotation for your bracing, and any sort of start or end extensions. Sometimes if you put the bracing in on its own, there might be a little bit of overhang as you're trying to get the bracing on each corner. So you might want to put a minus extension in there just so it fits in within the panel. That's up to you. So once you've got your bracing properties in, you've also got this option to add plates. And you can also adjust the plate thickness and the size of the plate as well. So we're just going to move that down to be 100 mil. Okay, and then what we've got here is whereabouts your plate is going to be positioned in relation to your bracing. So you have to have a little think here about what sort of where your plates are going to be in relation to the orientation of the panel and whereabouts the bracing is starting as well. So we're going to have our start plate positions on the bottom left and the top right. And then also you can change the justification of these plates by moving it up or down in the panel slightly. So now I'm quite happy with my settings. I'm just going to select add, and we will see that kick into action. So as you can see here, I've got some bracing on both sides of my panel, and I've also got my plates put over that, and this bottom corner of the plate is just lining up with the bottom, the center of the bottom of the bracing. So using my alignment options that we saw, that's how I've specified the bracing, but if you wanted to have it center to center, that's also possible as well. So now we're going to look at a different type of bracing, and that's our K bracing. This is quite useful if you only want sort of some extra support within like a small part of the panel. It also gives a little bit of a smoother finish when you're plastering over it as well. So here we have our K braces, and you get sort of a different set of properties really. You get a visual here, which is just sort of like one diagonal brace between two studs. What I can see here is I've got this invert, which when I click, it just moves around. And also this put diagonals, which is grayed out at the moment. So again, I'm going to start my, before I start, what I'm going to do is just make sure that this panel can accommodate this bracing, which it can because we're on a 600 spacing. So sometimes if your studs are too close together, there won't be enough room for you to accommodate the bracing. So here we are, we're going to start that again from our end stud. Then you've got this option to select your number of sections. So when you increase that, you can see you get an extra diagonal put in there and an extra horizontal. So we're going to pick 3. You can also change these offsets, say if at the moment they're equal in the panel, but if you didn't want them to be equal, you could change that. Now here you get the option to change the number of braces. So as you can see, every change you make is represented in this preview. If you want to invert them, you can do here sort of to change the pattern. And also if you wanted some diagonals in the first bay and the third bay, but not in the second, you could just uncheck this put diagonals. So all you have here is sort of a horizontal. And then if you wanted your horizontals to stretch throughout the panel, you could keep adding bays. So you have one continuous horizontal and then only bracing in a couple of bays. So now I'm going to change my justification to the same justification of the panel, which is the structural center line. And also I'm going to select the family that I want to use. We also have, what we have here is the option to select the family for your horizontal stud, and you can also change the orientation, double up the horizontal, or break the horizontals if you wanted to. And you can also add some cutbacks and plates here. So I'm going to name my brace, so we will just call this webinar. And I'm going to select add. And now I've got those brace settings saved within this sort of K-brace options. I can access my brace attachment options. So this is quite useful. Basically, if you want to control whether the diagonal falls on the track or on the stud, it's quite useful for your CNC. So you can have it within the center of both the members or just on one of them, and you can control that at any point within the diagonal. So we don't want to discard our changes, and we're just going to apply that to the panel now. So as you can see, we've got our bracing in there. We've got all the families that we chose. And again, if I wanted this horizontal to go all the way through the panel, I could add the amount of bays that are in the panel and just not have any diagonals in there, or I could add extra diagonals if I wanted to. Again, this is one whole horizontal, but I can check the split horizontals in the properties to make these sort of individual parts. Okay, so let's have a look at our splices. This is a very, very useful tool if you want to split up a member within your panel, but you don't want to create another panel. So for example, if you want to split up this stud or one of these tracks, it's definitely good to have a look at the splices. Okay, so miscellaneous. So in the properties here, you get the option to splice by line or by maximum length. So here you specify the maximum length of your cut. Here we're going to splice by line because we just want to cut all the way through these members. We are not going to select the horizontal stud just because we just want this in the top and bottom track. We're going to select a minimum and maximum distance from the stud. So I'm just going to say 20. Minimum length of 0. And then I'm going to select my distance from the start of the panel. So I'm going to say about 500 mil. I'm going to add this. Again, if I wanted another splice, I could change this to a meter and add that again. So you'd have 2 splices within the panel. So I'm just going to check OK. So we just got a little bit of an error there saying the splices would have been a little bit too close together. So we've only got one of them put within the panel, but it does a good job. As you can see, we've got that cut in the top track and the bottom track. It's all still part of the same panel. You've just got 2 separate tracks there. So that's good if you want to, if you're sort of trying to align your walls and floors together and you needed this cut in the top track. So let's have a look at our lifting holes. We are going to look at the only timber panel within the webinar. This is because there's 2 options for your lifting holes, as I will show you now. Gets rid of some of those errors. Okay, so when you select your lifting holes, as I have here, and you press edit, it gets a little bit grayed out. And this is because you just need to head into your drop down here and select style A. And then that's when you get your options up. So this is the visual that we get when we go into the timber options for lifting holes, but we can also go into the LGS options, which will be, the lifting method would be our Simpson's HCR clip. So this is the visual and the options that you get for this, which are different to our wood. So we've got two separate options. What we've got here is you can select to have your lifting holes the same at both ends, or you can change, you can have different positions of the holes throughout the panel. So what you get here is the distance from the closest member. That's not super self-explanatory, but what's quite nice is when you hover over here, it basically says from the closest vertical timber member, that's what that distance is. So it's from the timber member to the edge of the hole, and then it's the distance between the two. We've got a distance between the two holes, which we've got at 127, and then you've got another distance, which is sort of I suppose the y distance between them, which is so if you wanted them on the same sort of line, you could have this as 0, but we've got them at 25, so they're going to be on a slight diagonal. Then we can look at the hole placement. You can have them at the center of gravity, and you can put an offset for this, which is quite useful. Quite a nice feature to have them automatically placed in the right place for them to be lifted. Or you can select them to be at the start bay, or at any bay that you choose in the panel. So we'll just select our start bay, and also we want some clips, and we want them both on the interior and the exterior of the panel for extra support. But if you didn't want that, you could just select one of these options here. So let's press OK. Okay, so here are our holes. I think what's happened here is we've got a stud really close to the end stud here. So if we wanted our holes right at the end of the panel, we'd have to sort of change this offset here. But you can see we've got a nice diagonal between these two holes, and we've got clips supporting them on both sides of the panel. So yeah, it's quite just as simple as that, and you've got your lifting holes within your panel. So now let's have a look at some kickers. So kickers are quite useful when you've got a wall that is doesn't quite touch the ceiling. It ends before the ceiling starts, and you need some support from that wall to attach that wall to the ceiling. It's also good for supporting concrete slabs. So let's have a look at our kickers options. Okay, so what you get here is you've got a blank screen. So what we need to do is just press our plus sign here, and it invites you to create your own kicker set. So first we've got some options about the placement of the kickers. I'm just going to look at the options for the kickers themselves. So you can select the axial angle, the cutback offsets, the horizontal justification, and also you can select the family of which you want to use for the kicker. So we're just going to make that the same as what we've got in the panel. And we want these at the top of the panel, but you can also have them selected at the bottom of the panel. What's quite nice about this is, again, when you click into this, it shows you exactly sort of what the offsets mean. So we've got a 300 offset from the start of the panel when your first kick is going to be. And then it also shows you we're going to make this sort of minus 100 because we don't want our kickers to be right at the top of the panel. So they're just going to start a little bit further down than the top track. You can also select the kicker spacing. So we're just going to make them a little bit close together so we can see a few more kickers. And then also you can select sort of your maximum angle of between those diagonal kickers of what you want to see. And then here you can select your placement method. It's quite nice to have them next to the closest stud so they're aligned with the stud. And also you can select which way you want them, if you want them on both sides or if you want a staggered arrangement. And I think this is quite nice that you can have them at the center of the stud, the web side, or the open side. Then here we can look at, we have different options for our top attachment, the angles in which they're attached and how you want that attachment to be. So we're just selecting the elevation offset and lateral offset. So let's see some of our kickers. Okay, so there we are. You can see that imagining my ceiling is here. You can see that I've got my kickers staggered, and they are 45 degrees from the top of the panel, which means that they're 90 degrees between each other. So now we'll have a look at adding some connectors to this beam, which is next to our panel. So before going into the properties, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a deflection connector set. So I'm going to select a member in my panel, and I'm also going to select this beam here. And we're going to head over into our tools. And then we're going to create deflection connector rule. Again, once I've hovered over this, I get an explanation of exactly what this deflection connector tool is going to do for me. So I'm just going to call it Deflection Connector 1. Just give that a couple of seconds. Okay, so what we get here is a set of options. So say what I can do here is select the members that I want to use, select the clips, and press OK. And as you can see here, I've got my clips within the panel. But say I wanted to make a change on this, I'd just head into my properties and we'd go down to deflection connectors. So here we have again our options. So we've got our rule set here. You can also select by member if you just want to attach some connectors from certain members. So you can add any sort of extensions that you need to, change the justification, and also where these clips are going to be attached to the stud. With your connector, you can change the family for it. So again, we want to make that the same as what we've got in the panel. And also there's two different types of connector. If you've got the connector going around the stud, you might want to make that slightly bigger than, you might want to make that sort of a U section going around your C section. And also we can select our clip family type. So we might want to select a longer clip in this case. What's quite nice about this sort of scroll down here is you can see every angle of the clip. So you can see exactly what its properties are. And you get to select your connector offsets here. You can also select a top extension in this as well. So now I've made those changes, I'm just going to hit OK. And as you can see, we've got that longer clip in there, and we've got a change in our families with the connector from the stud to the clip. What's quite nice about this as well is I'll just show you once I've made these changes and I was to move this clip, this beam over. If I was to select this panel and the beam and then hit regenerate, the clips move along so they attach to the beam automatically. So everything's aligned quite nicely. So let's have a look at what we can do with some of our cutbacks. So I've got a panel here. If I just need to change that orientation a little bit. I've got my panel here, and we've got a window in it, and we've also got a horizontal through it. I think I already have a marker added to this. Let me check. Yep, we've got our double with vertical header. As you can see at the moment, we've got our horizontal going straight through our studs. So in that case, you'd have to have a web notch to accommodate them. And they're also coming up to just before the opening. And if you look at our header, that's going straight through our king studs, and we've also got a little bit of a clash with our cripples. So let's see how we can change that using our cutbacks. Okay. So let's select our cutbacks. Our first one is our header. So you can see what's highlighted in red is what we've got at the moment. So our header is flush to our outer king. I think maybe what we'd like is to have our header sort of just in the inside of the king studs. So if there was any jack stud below it, it would just be sort of running over the top of that and then just finishing where the king studs start. We've also got the same situation for our sills, so we're going to update that. We don't have any jack studs in this, so we'll just leave that for the moment, but as you can see, you get sort of a nice visual of where you want your members to end within that header. So here we've got our verticals. Again, that's where your verticals are going to stop within your top track. If you want them to sort of end within the inside of your top track, you can change that here. We've also got our horizontal studs. Again, they're finishing at the outside of your studs. We're going to have them selected to finish at the inside, and you could also have them flush with the middle of the stud. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to change the cutback on our cripples, just so again they're ending within the inside of those members. If you were to have a bearing beam within your header, there is some additional options that you can change here. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure my horizontal studs are split so they are able to split up and change the cutback within that. Okay, so you can see we've got a couple of changes here. First, our horizontals have ended just nicely inside the studs. There might be a little bit of an issue with connection here, so you could consider placing some clips to connect that. Also, we've got our cripples here, and there's no clash here. You can see that's ending just above the header, and the header is also ending right in between the king studs. And the same with the sill. So it's quite nice having that visual there, so you know exactly what to expect when you select the properties. So now we're just going to have a look at our extensions. This is a good way to extend any verticals or diagonals that you have within your panel, but I think in general it's just used for CNC purposes. So we're just going to enable our extensions. You've got two options here to do your maximum angle. Again, when you click on this, you get a little bit of a visual to know exactly what you're inputting. So we don't have any diagonals, so all of our vertical studs are 90 degrees, and we're going to do quite a big extension so you can see sort of what change is being made. So we've got an extension of 50 there. And as you can see, we've got at the top of the panel, we've got an extension of our studs coming out the top track. And that can be adjusted quite easily. And again, you can do this for any sort of diagonal bracing within your panel. So now let's have a look at all the different at how we can use whole series. There's a couple of different ways of applying this into the panel, but we'll see how we can do this using our properties. So we're going to go all the way down to the bottom, and we're going to select whole series. So at the moment, we have one void hole, which that's basically been created when we've attached our lifting holes. But right now we want to make a web notch. So we select that from our type. I'm just going to call this WN. I'm not going to add a CNC operation code, but this can be very useful for you to attach that operation code so you'll be able to always recognize it in your CNC. And at the moment, I haven't got any member types included for this hole, so none of these members will actually register this web notch, and we want to change that, so we're just going to select all of them, and we're just going to hit add. Also, once you've saved your holes, you can export them and import them into different files. So I'm going to edit shape on this now. I edit the shape now I've added this. I'm just going to make it slightly bigger because it's 25 mil at the moment. We're going to press save. And I'm going to add one more hole, and that's going to be our slot hole. So we'll call that SH. Again, select all the members we want it to be included. If there's only certain members that you want this to see this hole in, you can unselect this. So if you didn't want to see them around the headers, you could deselect your header members. Again, I'm going to edit the shape. We've got some slightly different options here. You can have a center to center length and also the diameter of your slot hole. So now we've got these hole types saved. We're going to just add them into our panel. We're going to the first option you have down here is you've got every member in the panel, and you can also select specific members you want to be excluded from this hole type, but I think we want to see it sort of throughout the panel. So first we're going to have the horizontally spaced holes, and I think that we would like our slot hole to be in the horizontal members of the panel. We want them right at the start of the panel, so I'm just going to get rid of this offset here. And again, I want them to start at the start, and I can change that to the end if I wanted to. And we've got a spacing of 475. And we'll just click add here. I'm clicking on my vertical spacing, and I want to add my web notches to this. When I go on vertical space, you can see the settings that I've just saved in the horizontal space also in here, and don't let that confuse you. That is just all the hole types you will see within this panel. So here's my web notch. I'll keep all the offsets in there and just select add. So at the end of this, I can review I've got my slot holes and my web notches within my panel. I can also sort of select these holes to go in the center of each bay within my panel. Okay, so I'm just going to press save on that and hit OK. And then I'm just going, that appears to not have done anything, so I think I just need to double check that that's saved. Okay. Yep, so that hasn't saved, so I'm just going to quickly add this so you can see those in the panel. So that's fine. And we're going to add our slot holes. Add, and then we select save and press OK. Give that a couple of seconds. Hopefully we see it this time because the second time's a charm. Just give it a few moments to add all those holes into the panel. Okay. So yeah, here we are. As you can see, we've got our slot holes in a series throughout the bottom of our top and bottom tracks, and then we've got our web notches throughout our vertical studs. So that's one way of adding holes to your panel. Another way is if you want sort of a more custom approach, you can set up those hole types in the properties, and then you can just head over to our markers, create marker lines, and associate one of your hole types to the panel, in which you can sort of edit exactly where they're going to be within your panel in quite a visual way. So there's a couple of different ways of doing it. So finally, let's have a look at adding some hold downs and anchors within our panel. So I'm just going to head all the way down, and we've got two options here. We've got our anchors and our hold downs. So I'm not actually going to add using our anchors because you can add that within the Holddowns, but I'll just show you what options we have available. You can add a minimum clearance. What you have here is you've got our list of hole series, like what we looked at before. So you can select a hole. I've got a default slot hole, and then if I click manage here, you can see we've got this sort of window that we just looked at in the hole series. So I can select any of these custom holes that I've made within the properties, or I can edit the slot hole that I've just selected there. And then also we have our anchor family. You can edit the size or shape of this if you need to. And then also we can select our spacing here. So I'm just going to click off that, and then we're going to add some hold downs. So enable hold downs. Here you have the option to insert bottom or top hold downs. So we're just going to put those at the bottom. We want our placement pattern to be both at the start and the end, and you can add an offset here, but we're just going to keep that as it is. We're going to just add a default service hole, and again, if you look here you can edit your hole types. So we've got quite a lot of different families for our hold downs, so you can select any one you like, and also we've got some different sort of types here, like minimum and maximum sizes. And here I just need to sort of insert bottom anchors, and again you can select your family here. So I want my hold down sort of to be in a nice pattern on every single stud throughout my panel. If I didn't want this and I just wanted it sort of at a certain point in my panel, I would select place by offset, and then I could also select the running offset of exactly where I wanted it within my panel. And what I can do here is, again, if there's any members that I don't want to have a hold down, I can deselect these. So let's hit OK. Okay, so as you can see, on every single stud here, it's just put in our hold downs, and we've also got our anchors in there just put in. That's quite nice because everything's coordinated together. And I'm just going to select on my anchor here, and if you can just see below that, it's also automatically put in that service hole, sort of a nice size for the anchor, it all in line with the hold downs. So again, use the anchors if you don't want to put in your hold downs, but if you want both, it's quite useful to add the anchors and hold downs together. Okay, so I think that is all we have time for today. So to recap, we've looked at how to apply some of the options in the properties panel, including bracing, splices, deflection connectors, and hold downs. Thank you for attending, and I look forward to your questions. For more handy MWF pointers, check out our tech tips on the Struxoff Solutions YouTube channel. So I will hand you back over to Inesu now.
Thank you very much, Natalie. It does look like we have time for a few questions. If you'd like to be selected for a live question, please use the raise hand button on your control panel and be sure that your audio is working correctly. While we wait for questions to come through, I'd like to remind everyone that the recording of this webinar will be sent through shortly after the session is closed. As always, please feel free to share the recording with any colleagues. If you'd like to set up a one-on-one demo, we highly encourage you to reach out to our team after the session has ended. Our technicians will be able to take you through how you build and how our MWF modules and extensions can benefit your next project. So, does look like you've done a comprehensive job. It doesn't seem like there's any questions being raised today. If that will suffice, I suppose we will conclude today's webinar. So we'll wrap it up for today. For any questions that have not been answered, that you had not found the answer to during the webinar, we will feel free to email us on the addresses outlined here, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Once again, thank you very much, Natalie. for your time, and thank you very much to everyone who registered for the webinar. We will now be ending the session. We appreciate your attendance here today, and goodbye.